What's up? Welcome back to Ion Motive. My name is Ian Kenrick, and I'm so happy to have you here today. I'll be very clear from the get-go. In today's episode, I'm going to be talking about men's mental health and the concept of reason versus emotion, logic versus emotion. I think one of the reasons that some people, especially guys, struggle with being open and talking about their mental health, seeking help when necessary, is because they misunderstand this concept. They are told, or they should hear, that they should act according to reason, that they should act logically, and that they should not be emotional. And this causes a lot of issues that are unnecessary. So in today's episode, I'm going to do my very best to change that. I'm going to first explain what this concept means, and then I'm going to explain what it does not mean. And then finally, I'm going to conclude by explaining why speaking up and being open about your mental health is a strength and not a weakness. Before we get going in today's episode, I have been working on the shirts. I just ordered some samples, so once I get those, I will share some of the designs with you. I'm really looking forward to that. I'm getting really excited because I can see the finish line, and those will be out soon. So stay tuned for that. More updates are coming in the near future. One more thing before we start this episode, I do want to remind you that when I talk about mental wellness, I do not always mean specifically related to mental illness, specifically related to a diagnosable mental disorder. That is a part of it, but I'm just talking about mental wellness in general for everybody, because obviously, we've all got to take care of our mental health. We all have got to make sure that we feel great so we can keep moving forward in our lives. So when people say that you should act according to reason, that you should act logically, and that you should not give in to your emotions, that you should not be emotional, they mean that you should not base your actions off of your emotions, as doing so could lead to severe consequences. So, you should act according to reason. You should act logically. You should think out the best plan and act on that. To better explain this concept, here are a couple of quotes from Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, which is on my book list on ionmotive.com. If you want to purchase it, I highly suggest you do. It is a great book, so go find the link for it on my reading list. Anyways, the quote says, "How much more grievous are the consequences of anger than the causes of it?" So acting on anger, giving into anger, is worse than the cause of the anger itself. So if somebody comes up to me, does something really rude, does something awful, me acting out against that, me going and giving into my emotions, making the poor choice, hitting the person, doing something like that, would create a bigger issue probably, right? So stay away from that. That is what this concept is trying to explain. So in short, it really means to act as you ought to do what is right, to think out the best plan, to not give in to your emotions in the moment. Another example, super silly, but I love ice cream. I love Moose Tracks, Caramel Caribou, a couple of the best flavors. If I buy a tub, I might be tempted to give in to my emotions, my passions, just eat the whole thing. But doing so would probably not be the best idea. I should probably limit myself, because if I eat the whole thing, I'm going to feel like crap. I'll probably have a huge sugar crash. There are a lot of negatives that could come out of me eating an entire tub of ice cream. But it does kind of sound like a good idea at times. But no. Anyways, giving in to the emotions, giving into your passions leads to larger issues down the road. So you should act reasonably, you should act logically. Yeah, maybe I shouldn't hit this person. Maybe I shouldn't eat the entire tub of ice cream. Those are kind of silly small examples, but I think they do a pretty good job explaining what this concept means. Now, let me explain what this concept of reason and logic versus emotion does not mean. It does not mean that you should never be emotional. That may not make sense right now, so let me do my best to explain. Emotions are a normal part of life. Emotions are what make your life rich. Unfortunately, as much as I would like to have everybody be happy all the time, that cannot happen. To know happiness, you have to be sad at times. You have to know what sadness is. To feel calm, must know what it's like to feel uncomfortable. Having both sides of the spectrum allow you to actually understand the highs in life, the great emotions in life. Here is another quote from Marcus Aurelius's Meditations that helps explain this idea a bit further. He says, "To investigate and analyze with understanding and logic the principles we ought to live by, not to display anger or other emotions, to be free of passion and yet full of love." Let me read those last couple sentences again. Not to display anger or other emotions, to be free of passion and yet full of love. So when we're talking about this concept of reason and emotion, we're doing so in a philosophical sense. So the passions, the emotions are lower than the virtues, like love. To love somebody is not necessarily to be emotional. When they're saying don't be emotional, they're saying don't let your darker emotions, your instincts to control you. Do not give in to your anger. Do not give in to your hate. Do not give in to those emotions that arise and can quickly control you. Be calm, collected. Think out the best solution. Think out the best action and do that. So something like love is not one of those instincts that we should avoid. It is something we should embrace. It's one of these higher virtues that make life great, that we should aspire to, that we should act on. As much as I would like to try and explain this further, I'm sure it would become very complicated very fast, and my teaching of it might not be all that great. So if you haven't yet, I suggest you read Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. It's one of my favorite books. I've read it twice, and it can kind of explain this distinction a bit more. It really helped me understand it. Actually, interestingly enough, Marcus Aurelius was a Stoic, and the philosophy of Stoicism is one of the core principles of CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy. So again, separate yourself from your emotions. Do not give in to them. Think logically. Try to look for the reasonable action, the reasonable evidence. That's a huge part of CBT, and it's a huge part of Stoicism as well. So I just thought that was an interesting side note. But anyways, back to the point of this show. I hope that somewhat made sense to you. But really, my point with all of this is this. Speaking up about your mental health, being open and vulnerable is never a weakness. It is a difficult thing to do, and it requires a lot of strength. When we think of strength, when we think of these virtues like courage, we always think of it in this huge sense, like, oh, dying for somebody in battle, pulling somebody out of a burning car. And obviously that is a part of courage, but courage is something that is also a part of everyday life. Courage isn't always about standing up and fighting for others. Sometimes courage is about standing up and fighting for yourself and for your mental wellness. Why? It's a difficult thing to do. It is a hard thing to admit you're struggling. It is a hard thing to talk about your emotions, about your anxiety, about your fear, about your worry. And I think that's one of the reasons that guys really have a hard time with this. They hear this concept that they should act according to reason, that they should act logically, and that they should not be emotional. And for that reason, they keep all their emotions inside. They think, maybe if I express these, I'll be considered weak. I'll prove that I'm not as strong as I should be. Or they think, I shouldn't have these feelings of anxiety, fear, or worry. And that's all BS. All of your emotions, all of your anxiety, all of your fear, all of your worry, everybody has that. It's a part of being a human being. And I don't think anybody really likes to talk about their mental health struggles. But really, it pays off. It is so beneficial to do so. And if you're afraid to do so, if you're having a hard time doing that, let me be an example for you. So I do a lot of traditionally masculine things. And if you're listening to this on podcast, I'm putting that in quotes because it just seems silly saying. But anyways, I played sports all throughout high school. I played baseball, I played football, I played football in college for a couple years. I did pretty well in sports throughout my playing career. I work out all the time. I love just lifting weights. It's kind of a stupid thing to do, really, when you think about it. All you do is pick it up and drop it, right? But I do that 4 or 5 times a week. I love it. And I think I've done pretty good in my work so far. I love to go fishing. That's one of my most favorite things to do. It's just a great way to pass time and probably one of my favorite hobbies overall. I love talking about investing. I love talking about stocks. I love talking about business. I'm interested in how to make money, all of those kinds of things, side hustles, things like that. And I experience emotions all the time. I cry. Just this last week, I officiated my sister's wedding, my big sister Emily's wedding. And I had never done something like that. And I'm so happy I did. It was one of the most beautiful things I've done in my life. But it was so stressful. I mean, there was a lot of time that went into it. There was a lot of effort that went into it. And I was crying during the ceremony. Those were tears of joy because I was so happy for Emily and her new husband, Larry. But after the ceremony, I started crying a lot more. And again, tears of joy, but I also think it was tears of relief. It was a stressful moment and there was a lot that went into it and it was finally done and it was just my emotions kind of got the best of me in that moment. And that's okay. I cry in other times. I cry watching movies. I cry watching Lord of the Rings because it's so beautiful. I cry when Mufasa dies in Lion King. I cry when times get hard. I cry when people pass away. I cry when I'm struggling, right? That's just a normal part of my life. I deal with anxiety a lot of the time. I deal with worry a lot of the time. I have my fears. When I was 2 years old, I went to therapy for OCD and anxiety. When I was 10 or 11, I went again. And I probably should have gone a third time during college. It happens. It is a part of who I am. It's a part of who everybody is. Everybody has to deal with those kinds of things. And it's okay to speak about it. Again, that is a courageous thing to do. I don't even really enjoy talking about this stuff on the show, but it's an important thing to do. Hopefully, if I talk about it, somebody else will speak up and do the same. It's difficult to do, but it pays off. Once I spoke up, it helped me so much. I got the help I needed, and I felt better. I started moving forward to becoming the person I want to be. Here's another reason why you should talk about your mental health if you're struggling. If you are into self-improvement, which you probably are if you're listening to this podcast, you must tend to all areas of your life, including your mental health. You cannot just focus on a couple and neglect another area. You have to tend to all of them, and your mental wellness is a huge aspect, is a huge part of your life. I've talked about it before in the last couple of episodes, but this spine metaphor, right? There are different pieces of your spine, the different vertebrae that make up the entire system. And if just one of those areas is lacking, then the whole system is not as effective as it could be, is not working properly. Here's a perfect example of that. When I was dealing with these issues in college, when I was dealing with OCD and anxiety, I was playing football and I was doing pretty good. I was probably in the best physical shape I had ever been. I was also doing pretty good in school. I was getting pretty decent grades and I was working hard on that. But I wasn't tending to my mental health. And because of that, those other areas ended up suffering. They ended up not being at the level they should be. Because of one area, I was deprived in all of my life. So if you're trying to really develop yourself, if you're trying to reach some crazy goals, you have to tend to every area of your life. Because not doing so will drag you down. And it is important that you do so as soon as possible. When you push it off, when you neglect it, the issues tend to become more severe, they tend to become more prolonged. Address the problem right away, and it will be worth it. So really, do what you need to do. Get help, talk to people, cry, whatever it is, it's worth it. You've got to take care of your mental health. I do want to remind you of something. How you feel does not determine who you are. Your emotions do not determine who you are as a human being. You are so much stronger than you know, and you are so much more capable than you know. One point in time does not determine who you are for the rest of your life, who you are throughout your life in general. You might not feel it right now, but you are a powerful individual who can take charge of their being. That is all I have for today's episode. I hope that it helped you in some way. I really think this is probably one of the most important topics that I've discussed on the show so far, and I'm really happy I did. I've been looking forward to talking about this topic for quite some time. Thank you again, and please share this with anybody if you think that they would find it valuable, if you think it would help them. My goal with this episode was really just to help people, especially men, speak up about their mental health, get help with their mental health, do whatever they need to keep moving forward with their life. The next episode, or the episode after that, I'm not sure which one. Hopefully the next episode will be a guest interview, and I'm really looking forward to that. But that is all I'm going to say for the moment, so stay tuned for that upcoming episode. That is all I have for you for now. So with that, check me out on social media, stay in touch, let me know what you thought of today's episode. It would really mean a lot to me. And yeah, I'll see you on the next episode. Until then, remember, take charge of your being.